Hello and welcome to Beyond the Words. Beyond the Words is a new podcast produced by Zeitgeist, and we're going to be talking to people who have career paths involving multilingual communication. So people like us who are on the localization side, and also people who work in marketing, but across internationally across the world. And so we're going to start today with Bruno Combart, who is the founder and managing director of Zeitgeist. And we're going to go through a bit of his career, what brought him where he is today. And so, Bruno, can you start us off a little bit about your background? Because you didn't actually start in languages.
Hi, Amanda. Yeah, well, I sort of I started with languages, but they were not really like it was not the language industry per se. You know, languages were always like useful to do other things. So yeah, I had various experiences in business using my languages as well, because I used to speak a pretty decent German. Not so good now. It's a bit rusty, but basically, when I grew up, German was my first foreign language, and studied a couple of years in Austria as well. Worked in Germany before coming to the UK, and then starting like several jobs in the UK, more or less related to the tech industry. So that's where I had a first taste of the tech industry, and managing campaigns as well for a marketing agency working for tech brands and managing multilingual campaigns. And then I came to contact with LSPs at the time. I'm not sure whether they were already called LSPs. I think they were just called translation agencies. And got to see how they worked. And I sort of started to get a taste for it. And and then decided that maybe this is something I wanted to work in. And Zeitgeist was founded in 2003.
And what was your experience like working with those localization agencies at the time? Like, what was your impression of the work that they were sending back to you? I suppose you were the client.
Yeah, well, it was actually quite good, to be honest with you. It was we were working with some of the best LSPs in the transcreation industry, and some of them still exist. So I'm not going to name them, but at the same time, I felt that sometimes, and I was looking at the German ones and the German translation and French ones, and being mother tongue French as well, I thought, well, you know what, they could probably work a bit harder, they could do a bit more for the client. And then I was a bit quite shy at the beginning. I didn't really want to, I felt a bit like an imposter syndrome, I didn't really want to touch it. And then I thought, no, but I'll make a few changes and maybe that sounds a bit better this way, etc. And I was actually getting some good feedback from the clients saying, oh, the translation, French translation this time was better than last time. I'm like, oh, okay. And then, little by little, I thought maybe this is something I want to do. I was really enjoying doing it as well, So I thought this is something I can do. And again, I decided after working for 4 years for the marketing agency I was with, that maybe I could give it a go. And then the rest is history. They became my first client. So that was absolutely fantastic, because I hit the ground running with a few projects working for big tech brands as well. And that was just great for me, because then after that, going to talk to new clients and other clients, then you can always name drop a bit the brands that you're working for, and that's how it happened.
Right. And what made you decide to, rather than just sticking to French, to freelancing, to expand into a whole agency that covers all sorts of languages?
Yeah, well, again, because I had managed those campaigns in the beginning, I felt I had more to add than just doing French, and then freelancing is a very solitary type of life and work. And I felt I wanted to do something to do a bit more. I enjoyed as well, like being in touch with translators, briefing them as well. And I know that a lot of translation agencies were not doing that at the time. I was briefing them on target audience, tone of voice, giving them some background, reading their translations as well when I could understand the language. And I really enjoyed that sort of coordinator kind of work. And so that's why I thought, this is really something I want to do.
Okay. And what at the original marketing agency you were working with tech clients. What made you stick with that? What interests you about tech as an industry?
Well, I really, again, I came to the tech industry by chance, really. Some of those serendipity moments, and I really got a taste for it as well. I thought it was really exciting, and the tech world was nothing like it is today, but it was already quite exciting. It was fast moving. We were talking about the beginnings of e-commerce. It was the time of the dot-com bubble, so there was some sort of enthusiasm and optimism with what tech could do, and it was a really exciting world to work in. And then, of course, working for a few years in that field, I had sort of gained a bit of competency and skills, and I thought, this is my area of competence, and yeah, that's how I sort of carried on. But very early on as well, I realized that you have to specialize when you are in translation. There were plenty of jacks of all trades in there, but I thought specialization is really what makes you different.
And you're talking a bit about about like the beginning of .com and the end of .com, I suppose, at the time. Can you talk a little bit about after 20 years in the business, like what's changed in terms of the tech industry and in terms of clients, but also in terms of like the localization industry, what changes that you've seen?
Yeah, it's changed so much. I mean, when you talk about, so you were talking about the localization industry, tech industry, marketing. If we start with the marketing industry, most of it, I mean, at the time, email marketing was in its infancy. A lot of it was about print. We had to do a translation by a certain date because there was a print deadline and these sort of things, which you don't have anymore unless it's for an event or something like that and they want to have some brochures printed, but that's it now. There was still a lot of direct mail being done, no social media. So, we don't even there was absolutely no social media marketing, nothing called, MarTech or these sort of things as well didn't exist. So it's come really leaps and bounds. Technology as well. I mean, as I said, it's changed so much. It's unrecognizable. When we see the iPhone came in 2007 or 2008, so it created a sort of app ecosystem. The cloud didn't exist at the time. Some of our clients were already selling a bit of spare space on their servers, and that's sort of what was called the cloud afterwards. But it was called apps on taps and these sort of things, utility computing and these sort of things before it was called the cloud. Cybersecurity. When you think that cybersecurity is the main industry we work for now within the tech industry. At the time, it didn't exist as an industry. There was a bit of antivirus and these sort of things, but it didn't really exist. So things have changed so much. And of course, the localization industry. Some of the players in that field have become billion-dollar companies now. Also, they've become like tech players in their own right as well. Nowadays, when you look at the very large LSPs, the mega LSPs, they sell a tech, and translation has almost become a byproduct. And a lot of them do machine translation, and it's by far the majority of their work. So they're in the big volume industry. And again, that's changed a lot. And of course, the elephant in the room, AI. Has come along in the meantime, and that's it seems to be revolutionizing our industry. But we might talk about that a bit later.
Well, let's start with machine translation. How do you feel about machine translation, sort of as a tool for translators, as a tool for clients? Where do you stand on it?
Well, it's both both a threat and an opportunity for translators. I think that it's a threat in a way that on the sort of lower end of translation, on the low context projects, it can replace humans. Let's face it. I think it will still need some sort of oversight and post editing. But it can do most of the job and do it quite well. Yeah. So we're talking about like technical documentation manuals, some legal as well. All these fields are really at risk. I mean, human translators are at risk, or at least they have to reinvent themselves as post editors to stay relevant. And of course, in our field, it's a little different because we are in the field of marketing translation and transcreation. So it's a lot more high context, and it's so specific that I think for the time being, the human brain is way ahead of AI, and will be for some time, I feel anyway. And it's also an opportunity, I would say, for translators, because when you think that out of all the content that's created by our clients, maybe only 10% gets translated. So, they will get a lot more translated thanks to AI. And then also we're already working on this with our clients where, the high visibility stuff is 100% human. And then the lower visibility, what's a bit deeper on the website, for example, will be machine translated and post edited. And that enables them to generate SEO and have translated content where in the past it would have been in English, when English is the source language, but it would have been untranslated. So it's also beneficial, and I think that it's beneficial for translators because it's going to make the pie bigger, and that's also very important. So both an opportunity and a threat, I would say.
Yeah, I think we talked to a lot of translators who seem to maybe misunderstand how clients are using it sometimes. Like you mentioned, I think a lot of it is not instead of using a human, it's instead of translating at all, or it's sort of replacing the bottom end of the market, the people translating things that had really small audiences that nobody was really reading, that they weren't paying great rates for anyway. And yeah, on a similar topic, the generative AI, how do you think that fits into all of it, into translation, into working with machine translation, into how the industry can use it?
Well, yeah, I mean, the industry can use it, and there's a lot of people who are better placed than me to explain how the industry at large can use it. But in our particular field, and I'm talking about marketing translations, and in particular for the tech industry, again, I'm not sure whether it's got a big place yet. We've looked at both. We've compared neural machine translation like DeepL to ChatGPT, for example, and see how they compare. And there's not much in it really. It was, Gen AI, we were told that it was going to be more contextual, more accurate, more on brand than machine translation. But from the samples that we've tested, we didn't see much in it. And I think it comes from the fact that AI in general, whichever flavor of AI you have, it's only as good as the data that nourishes it. And that data at the moment in our very niche field, first of all, there's not much of it because, again, we're working in, let's take the example of European languages such as German or French. The data corpus will be a lot smaller in those languages than it is in English. So already it's at a disadvantage, and also the fact that it's a lot of it is already translated content, and most of it, if we are fair, is not very well translated. So it's almost like fairly poor quality or self-perpetuating. And because of that lack of corpus in both in quantity and quality, when you could have like a prompt engineer, and I'm talking about Gen AI here, prompting or briefing the AI engine and to come up with some content. We find that the content is always very wooden. It's and it's almost like regurgitates the same thing, but in slightly different form. And it reads very much like a year 10 or a year 11 history essay. And it doesn't sound quite right when you see what our clients want. They want things that are industry specific, that is client specific, that has a certain tone of voice. And AI still doesn't generate that. And the fact also that the tech industry is moving so fast. I was talking about the corpus. Technology that we're talking about now might be completely irrelevant 2 or 3 years time. So by the time you have a good corpus in a certain technology, then things will have moved on, and then there'll be a new technology that'll be the new kid on the block. And also, so for all those reasons, I think that in our particular niche industry, it's not quite there yet. Again, for lower context or lower visibility content, we're happy to do post editing like we're doing for some of our clients already. But really, for the high visibility stuff, you need several good human brains. So translator, reviewer, and project managers.
And I think what you were talking about earlier with changes in the marketing industry, I think a lot of what we get asked to work on, there's a lot of ABM, especially in B2B marketing, a lot of very targeted stuff, and you can't really get away with, like you said, making it sound like a 10th grade English essay. And it doesn't work for that kind of marketing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there will be more and more ABM. And as you said, it would be ridiculous to try and use AI for this sort of things, because it is so specific and so contextual that it is a waste of time. We've tried doing that on some samples and we've seen the result, and it's just like, it's a waste of time. I have to restart from scratch.
Yeah. So you don't think that the whole industry is a race to the bottom? You think there is still an appetite for quality?
Well, totally. Yeah, I think there is an appetite for quality when we talk to our clients, especially on the marketing side. Clients want that. They don't want the word for word literal translations. They want people who understand their business. They want people who understand their industry, who are able to really recreate or rewrite the copy in the target language. And that appetite is still there. You see, we always worried that there will be some sort of that's good enough kind of mentality, but we don't see it. We see really people on the other side, on the marketing side, who really want that quality. And again, I don't think it's going to change for a certain number of years anyway.
No, and people who don't want to spend time rewriting all of it themselves.
Well, exactly, because that's what happens, when we receive something that's too literal, you start to rewrite, but you haven't got the time to do it. You're quite frustrated that you have to do it. And usually it's never the end result, even if you know your products well and you can write pretty well. The result is never going to be as good as there was a good translation to start with. And I think that our clients realize that as well. So it's not only good for their brand, for their message, what they put out there, but it's also good for them. It saves them a lot of time and a lot of aggro.
And talking a little bit, going back to something you were talking about in the beginning in terms of like client expectations, you were talking about a lot of people who were jack of all trades, master of none, and figuring out that specialization was sort of key. Can you talk a little bit about that, about differentiation through specialization?
Yeah, absolutely. You can see that at the moment, those jack of all trades, especially in the mid-market area, they're suffering now because they don't have the economies of scale of the large, very large, the mega LSPs, and they don't have the specialization either. And I think that specialization is differentiation. So we are very much doubling down on that specialization because it's more relevant than ever. And again, it makes us different. It brings a skill that the machine doesn't have. It brings an experience that the machine doesn't have. It enables us to read through the lines as well. Because when you think about the copy that comes to us, some of it is excellent. Sometimes it's not that great. Sometimes it's got inconsistencies. It's got a few, a bit of redundancies, and it's quite repetitive. And it's our job as well to sort of iron out all these little flaws in the source copy to make sure that it reads like an original in the target language. And that's what the machine can't do. And that's what human translators can't do either if they don't specialize in that particular field. And that's also why we have in-house translators. I know that a lot of LSPs these days, they only work with freelancers. We have in-house translators so that we keep that level of excellence for our clients.
Can you talk a little bit about how you brief translators to think that way? Because talking about sort of the source versus the target, I think a lot of the way that translators are trained is to sort of really accurately represent the source. And of course, I mean, if you're working with a lot of companies who are producing this content, they obviously want to keep the message in the content. But can you talk a little bit about how you brief translators to move away from the source a little bit more than maybe they're used to?
Yeah. Well, I think it's and I spoke about it like last autumn. I was invited in a workshop at the ITI in Scotland, and we talked about it, and it was really a very productive workshop where you have to take a target-centric approach. You have to think about, okay, I've got this message to put across, and I have this target audience to talk to. How do I put the message across as clearly and with as much impact as possible? And that's very important. So there's the target-centric approach. Unfortunately, I find that translators most of the time, the way they're trained, it's more about, that's what the source says, and we have to religiously repeat exactly what it says. But again, the source comes with certain flaws sometimes, and then if you reproduce all of them, that's how clients can feel that the translation is too literal, And it's the other thing is to think of yourself not as a translator, but as a communicator. And I think that's very important. And I was giving them the example of a marketing article that was written like back in the 70s or something like that. It took the example of like in the US at the turn of the century, the companies that were in the stagecoach industry realized that they were doomed because they only considered themselves as in the stagecoach industry and not as in the transportation industry. And therefore, they were completely eaten alive by the train revolution. And it's the same with translators. If they think of themselves just as a translator, and again, I'm talking about our field. I'm not qualified to talk about other fields, but in our field, they don't think of themselves as a communicator. They have to think in a broader sense.
Okay, can you talk a little bit maybe about what's next for Zeitgeist?
Well, Zeitgeist has grown through word of mouth, and so now we want to go out there and maybe be a bit more visible. So maybe do a bit more marketing and get out there, get the name out there. So that's part of the effort. The other thing as well, we still want to grow in the tech industry. That's what we want to do, mainly in the B2B tech industry. Maybe branch out to green tech as well. I know that our translators are very keen on that. It gives a sense of purpose as well. We have clients who are already quite active in that, in green IT. And it's and I know that our translators like working on that kind of content. So, but maybe we can start working for pure players in that industry. So that's the kind of that's the next frontier for us, working for these guys. And as I said, get out there, be a bit more visible. We don't want to be the best kept secret in the industry anymore, but more like people that become the go-to LSP for good tech marketing translation. And the podcast is also part of it. And it's about combining business with pleasure, because we like talking to people. We always enjoy talking to our clients and talking to different people in the industry, which is what we're going to do with the podcast. And also, for hopefully get people to see the podcast, get really inspired, and get to know Zeitgeist if they want to.
Yeah, and one last question that I think we're going to plan to ask all of our guests. If you were to learn a new language, which one would you choose and why?
Yes. So I must say I cheated a bit, because we put that question together. So I had time to think about it. And I was thinking about like certain, like when you're in Europe and you don't speak Italian or Spanish, or you think, oh yeah, maybe that's the language that I would like to speak. But then I thought no, because through my extended family, I have ties with Sri Lanka. And I'm always quite frustrated when I go there that I don't speak Sinhalese, which is the main language. It's one of the two official languages in Sri Lanka with Tamil. And I feel quite frustrated when, especially when we go a bit like backcountry, and then people's English is not that great, and I can't really communicate with them, even like to ask when the next bus is, or these sort of things. And yeah, so it would be nice, but it's never too late, and maybe I should start.
Yeah. Yeah, I would like to hear you speak some of it. Can you say anything?
Badikini, which means like I'm hungry. And also with there's one as well, which we use a lot because we use it in Europe as well, which is ganang. Ganang means too expensive or expensive. So, when you go somewhere and then you look at something and say, oh, it's quite nice, and you don't want to say in front of people that it's too expensive. We just say ganang, and then they understand that it's just, well, we understand between ourselves that it's just too expensive. And there's a few other words like that I know, but it's very, very limited.
I think, yeah, being able to tell people that you need food and also that their products are too expensive is a good start, I think, in any country.
Well, exactly. You got to start somewhere.
Great. Well, yeah. Thank you very much, Bruno.
Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah, we'll see you in the next episode.
Yeah, we'll not swap chairs, but I'll be sitting on the same chair as yours, and we'll be co-presenting. Just before we finish as well, just about the name of our podcast, I think it would be nice to talk about this. So we called it Beyond the Words because, again, as we were suggesting in the during this interview, the industry is very much about volumes and number of words and SLAs, and but we want to go beyond that. We want to go beyond and behind the scenes and talk to the people who make these things happen, and see it from their eyes. And of course, it's also an allusion to what's become our philosophy, or was our philosophy from day one, translating ideas, not words. And Beyond the Words is also a sort of a subtle allusion to that.
Yeah, and there's so much that goes into people's careers, especially the people who aren't working directly in localization. Beyond just the words, there's so much that goes into the production behind them. So we're looking forward to finding out all about that.
Wonderful. Look forward to this.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bruno.
Thank you, Amanda.